You're traveling through the unknown, a journey beyond the corners of reality, where the shadows whisper and the chill runs deep. Welcome to the dimension where your deepest fears are given form. This is The Midnight Mystery.
Welcome to The Midnight Mystery. This episode is called I Escaped Hell's Demons. In each episode, we delve into the shadowed corners of our existence, bringing you tales of the eerie, the uncanny, and the downright terrifying. From the realms of the supernatural to the depths of the human psyche, no stone is left unturned, no dark secret left hidden. As the clock once again draws near midnight, prepare to embark on another adventure into the uncanny, the eerie, the horrifying, the midnight mystery. My lungs felt like they were on fire, each gasp for air mingling with the taste of sweat and dust. Sarah was right beside me, her eyes wide with the same terror I felt. Our footsteps hammered on the cracked ground in a desperate rhythm. Every second stretched, threatening to break under the pressure of our racing hearts. Behind us, the monstrous growl of the demonic creature filled the air, a cacophony of death that seemed to grow louder and closer with each passing second. "Don't look back!" Sarah screamed, her voice nearly lost amidst the roars and the panting. I didn't need to be told twice. To look back was to lose valuable seconds, to confront the approaching nightmare that could swallow us whole. We had been running for what seemed like an eternity, yet time was a luxury we couldn't afford. We had to reach somewhere, anywhere safe. And just when I thought the grim reaper in the form of this creature was about to claim us, something emerged from the fog ahead. "Walls! I see walls!" I yelled. Sarah's eyes met mine, a glimmer of comprehension flashing between us. Neither of us reduced our pace. If anything, we ran faster. The creature gave an enraged howl, sensing that its prey might escape. As we drew closer, I could make out the details: massive barricades, towers, and a fortified gate. It was a refuge. I'd heard whispers about these places, bastions of the last remnants of humanity. But until this moment, they had seemed like nothing more than myths, stories to tell ourselves that some sliver of civilization still existed somewhere. "Open the gates! Open the damn gates!" I screamed as we closed the distance. I saw guards in the towers, crossbows aimed, eyes wide with both shock and recognition. They saw use, but more importantly, they saw it. The gates started to open, but painfully slow, grinding as, though burdened by the weight of our desperation. I risked a glance back. The creature was almost upon us, its eyes glowing an infernal red, giant claws ready to tear us apart. "Run! Run!" one of the guards shouted from above, leveling a crossbow at the demon. An arrow zipped through the air and struck the creature. It howled in rage and pain, but didn't stop. The distraction bought us just enough time. We were almost there. "In! Now!" a guard on the ground yelled, his hand stretched out towards us. With one final sprint, propelled by a surge of adrenaline, Sarah and I lunged forward. The guards grabbed our arms and pulled us inside with Herculean effort. Behind us, the creature slammed into the fortified gates with a terrifying roar, shaking the barriers but not breaking through. The gates slammed shut, bolts locking into place. For a brief moment, all that could be heard was the creature's thwarted roars, echoing beyond the walls, and our panting breaths. We were inside. We were safe, at least for now. A guard approached, his face stern but relieved. "Welcome to Haven. You two are lucky to be alive." "Lucky doesn't even begin to describe it," I muttered, my eyes meeting Sarah's. We were here, in this refuge, this last standing fortress against the apocalypse outside. I didn't know then what the future held for us within these walls, but one thing was clear: our ordeal was far from over. And as I looked at Sarah, her eyes inscrutable, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were both hiding from more than just the demons outside. The moment we stepped inside Haven's fortified walls, the atmosphere shifted. The air was still tense, but it was a tension born out of vigilance, not immediate dread. Guards patrolled the battlements, craftsmen hammered away at their workbenches, and a group of medics bustled about, tending to the injured. "Let's get you two cleaned up," said Mark, one of the guards who had helped pull us inside. He led us to a hall filled with cots and medical supplies. "Nadia, got a couple of new arrivals," he called out. A woman with graying hair and a stern expression approached. "Sit. Let me take a look at you," she ordered, her eyes scanning both of us for injuries. She seemed satisfied that we were mostly unscathed. "You'll live," she declared. "Eat something. You'll need your strength." A young girl brought over bowls of what looked like a stew and handed them to us. I locked eyes with Sarah briefly as we ate. She was quiet, thoughtful, like she was absorbing the room around her. "So what's the deal with this place?" I finally broke the silence, looking at Mark. "Is it always this, tense?" Mark glanced at me, his eyes narrowing for a moment. "This is Haven, one of the last safe places for humans. We all have our rollies. Some of us guard the walls, some handle food, some are medics. Point is, we all contribute." "A commune behind walls," I muttered, taking another spoonful of stew. "Call it what you will," said Mark. "It's the closest thing to society we've got left." "What about leadership?" Sarah interjected, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Who calls the shots?" "We have a council," Nadia replied, cleaning her medical instruments. "Comprised of folks who've been here the longest, who know the ins and outs of Haven. But decisions are made collectively. That's how we've survived so far." "And what happens to people like us?" Sarah pressed. "Newcomers?" "You earn your keep," Mark answered, his tone icy. "You work. Prove that you belong. Prove that you can be trusted." I looked at the people around me, faces etched with weariness, eyes hardened by experiences I could only imagine. These were survivors, each one clinging to a role in a makeshift society because that's all there was left to do: survive. But even as I observed them, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah and I were just strangers in a room full of cautious eyes. The days in Haven passed in a blur. Each dawn brought its own set of challenges, but with it came a newfound purpose for me. It wasn't long before I found myself shoulder to shoulder with the men and women of Haven, hoisting sandbags, repairing the walls, and setting up barriers. The weight of the tools in my hands, the grit and grime, it all felt real, a semblance of normalcy in a world turned upside down. "Need a hand with that, David?" Sam, a burly man with a beard streaked with gray, would often ask, handing me another plank or tool. His voice was rough, yet his eyes held a certain kindness. "Always," I'd reply, the sweat dripping down my forehead. Together, we'd work to ensure that Haven stood tall for another day. Sarah seemed to find her place as well, at least on the surface. When I'd catch glimpses of her, she was always by Nadia's side in the medical bay, meticulously cleaning wounds, preparing herbal mixtures, or assisting with minor surgeries. The appreciation in the patient's eyes was evident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Sarah, something she wasn't letting on. One night, as I returned from late-night repairs on the west wall, I noticed a faint light coming from a secluded corner of Haven. Curiosity piqued, I approached, hiding in the shadows. To my astonishment, I saw Sarah. She was engaged in what seemed like a secretive conversation via a makeshift communication device. "The walls are sturdy," I heard her whisper, her voice trembling slightly. "But there are weak points. I can show you." I strained to hear the response, but the voice on the other end was distorted, muffled. The only word I could make out was, "creatures." My heart raced. Why was Sarah talking about Haven's defenses, and to whom? The conversation ended abruptly, and Sarah quickly stowed away her device. She left the secluded corner, her every step cautious, eyes darting to ensure she wasn't seen. The days morphed into a monotonous rhythm, punctuated by rare moments of stillness that allowed us to be human, even if just briefly. During one of those quieter times, Sarah and I found ourselves sitting on the makeshift rooftop of Haven, overlooking the barren landscape beyond the walls. "We used to worry about meaningless things, didn't we?" Sarah mused, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Yeah," I agreed, my thoughts drifting back to a time before monsters roamed the earth. Traffic, bills, deadlines. Funny how irrelevant all that seems now. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things hadn't gone to hell?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. "Sometimes, but pondering what-ifs won't change the what-is," I replied, feeling a strange heaviness in my words. That evening, like others before it, saw us share snippets of our past, our dreams shattered by a cruel reality, and our fears sculpted by a world that was relentlessly unforgiving. Through it all, Sarah seemed genuine, her vulnerabilities on display, just like mine. If I had any lingering doubts about her, they seemed to evaporate in those moments. But while we bonded, the walls of Haven grew weaker. I noticed the first signs during a routine check of the weapons cache. Crossbow bolts that were once sharp as razors seemed dull. The food stockpile had an unusually high amount of spoiled items, small inconsistencies that, when added together, pointed to a larger issue. Sam, something's off. The supplies, the weapons, they're not in the condition they should be, I warned during one of our meetings with the council. Could be the damp air, the changing weather, Sam speculated, scratching his chin. Or maybe we're just stretched too thin. Maybe, I conceded, although the unsettling thought that it could be something more deliberate crossed my mind. The night was so dark, it felt like we were wrapped in an abyss. On the rooftop of Haven, I strained to see through the inky blackness, but even the watchtowers seemed to be consumed by the dark. Then, without warning, all hell broke loose. Screams, I muttered, my ears picking up the faint but unmistakable sound of terror. The alarms were silent, the lights were off. Something was horribly wrong. My thoughts immediately flashed to Sarah. Was she safe? Rushing through the labyrinthine corridors of Haven, I stumbled upon Sarah in that secluded corner again, speaking hurriedly into her communication device. Yes, now's the time, she hissed into the device. We're vulnerable. Our eyes met, and the terrible understanding of betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave. Sarah, what have you done? I whispered, aghast. She stood there, momentarily paralyzed, her eyes meeting mine. David, But before she could continue, the deafening roar of the giant demon echoed through the air, drowning out any possible explanation, any futile excuse she could offer. The very same demon that had pursued us was leading the charge, and Haven's walls were crumbling under the assault. We have to do something. We have to. I shouted, panicked, gripping Sarah by her arms. Sarah, suddenly emboldened, pushed me aside and sprinted toward the main gate controls. I have to do this, David. You wouldn't understand. No. Sarah, you can't. Ignoring my plea, she reached the controls and with a swift, resolute motion, pulled the lever. The gates shuddered and began to open. Why? I screamed, my voice hoarse, my mind unable to wrap itself around the magnitude of her betrayal. Because this is bigger than us, bigger than Haven, she said, her voice quivering. These creatures, they're not abominations, they're gods, and they've chosen us to lead the new world. I looked into her eyes and saw no hesitation, only a disturbing clarity. She had made her choice. As the gates fully opened, the demonic creatures poured into Haven like a flood of malevolence, led by the giant demon. Its eyes locked onto Sarah for a moment, a flicker of what seemed like recognition passing between them. Then, as it moved past her, it turned its gaze to me, its eyes filled with a malevolent glee. Is this your new world? I asked, staring at Sarah one final time as the creatures ravaged through Haven, their roars drowning out the screams of dying friends. She looked back at me, her eyes finally showing a glint of something human, regret perhaps, or maybe just the dawning realization of the horror she had unleashed. But it was too late, for Haven, for me, and even for her. With each passing second, Haven became a living hell, flames dancing from one structure to another, the air filled with the acrid smell of burning wood and flesh. People fought back with anything they could muster, but it was evident. We were losing. In the midst of the madness, a plan, desperate and dangerous, formed in my mind. I worked quickly, fumbling together an improvised explosive device using gas canisters and bits of metal. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from an unfocused anger so raw it blurred my vision. Where do you think you're going with that? Sam's voice roared over the din of battle as he saw me hauling the makeshift bomb. To end this, I snarled, my eyes meeting his. Sam gave a solemn nod, a grim understanding flashing between us. Godspeed. I dragged the explosive device through the chaos, the giant demon's roars growing louder as it savored its destruction. Reaching an open area, I set the bomb, my eyes meeting the demons for the briefest of moments. I hit the detonator. The explosion catapulted me through the air, and I crashed into a pile of rubble, debris peeling over me. Trapped, unable to move, I looked toward where the demon had stood. It was annihilated, a heap of monstrous flesh smoldering in the firelight. My eyes found Sarah, standing amidst the ruins. She looked shocked, her eyes wide, finally grasping the magnitude of her actions. But her moment of reckoning was ephemeral. From the shadows emerged members of her cult, cloaked figures chanting incantations, believing they could command the creatures they had helped unleash. They were wrong. One by one, the demons turned on them, shredding through fabric and flesh with unholy glee. As dawn's light broke over the horizon, casting a sickly hue over the apocalyptic scene, I managed to free myself from the rubble. Wincing through the pain, I watched as Sarah found herself alone, her protectors and co-conspirators devoured, her eyes finally meeting mine across the smoky haze. The remaining demons circled her, their terrible eyes locking onto their next victim. I locked eyes with her one last time. No words were needed. The haunting image of the demons closing in on Sarah would be forever etched into my memory. In the eerie stillness of that morning, a chilling truth settled in my bones. In a world stripped of morality, ravaged by monsters both human and inhuman, there were no winners, no heroes or villains. Just survivors and victims, each indistinguishable from the other. I hope you enjoyed our episode. I'd like to extend a heartfelt thanks to you, our brave listeners. Your presence in this shared journey into the unknown is what fuels our stories. Your fascination is our motivation. Did this episode send chills down your spine? Then leave your comments, your thoughts and theories, your own midnight mysteries. Your feedback is the beacon that guides us through the uncharted territories of our stories. And if you haven't already, remember to subscribe to our channel. By joining the Midnight Mystery family, you won't miss out on a single chilling tale. As a subscriber, you'll be the first to know when a new episode lurks around the corner, ready to pull you back into the shadowy depths of the unknown. This is the Midnight Mystery signing off, leaving you with a simple reminder. When the clock strikes 12, fear the silence, for that's when our tales come to life. Good night, Midnight listeners. And remember, not all who wander into the dark are lost.